guys, after about 4 days, we can start to have a small thread about Kursk. First of all, I'm going to start with a mea culpa. The mea culpa was that I largely underestimated the day one of the operation, given by the initial geolocations that were all behind the Ukrainian border, the striker carousel, the attacks on the 3-4 Humvees. My bad, probably will happen again, but where I'm a bit more pissed is that, I mean, once I saw the tactical sign in my head was like, this is an op. It's not like back in the day, because every single operation, be that a raid, be that an attempt, was a bit wishy-washy, but a lot of videos that were pouring showed the triangle tactical sign. And unfortunately, yeah, I made that mistake by thinking that it would be just another raid along the Kursk last year, Tetkino, and then Belgorod last year and this year. Now, let's go to the thick of the situation. Fast enough, I changed my tune. A lot of people also changed my tune in the group. And if you followed me since the beginning of the operation, I pointed certain maps, which led to certain conclusions, and which now the fourth day, we're on Friday, you can quote me on that. I said it, by Friday, things are going to change. Once again, it was about the TAC log, so tactical logistical analysis. And one of the things that we're going to see every single time regarding operations in Ukraine is that what we see is not complete, far from it, but it cannot lie. So when you see groups of roughly a battalion going through, even if there is a second battalion with it, those guys cannot make miracles when it comes to logistics. So basically, 4 to 7 days, they will need something else. Even if the group, for instance, has like 7 MRAPs and 4 Humvees that would serve as a mule, so basically as supply vehicles, it's still not going to be enough for them to just sustain the whole point. Plus, on the TACLOG situation is that Suja is really, and this is something that I discussed in the group, Suja, like Volchansk, are absolute shit shows of locations for a border city. Like Volchansk, it is between 2 ridges. Like Volchansk, it's on the low ground. Like Volchansk, the approaching enemy will have the superiority of fire going in, but it's going to be a lot more complicated for him to go out of it. Same thing like Volchansk with Bibikolodiazi, same thing as other such cities in Ukraine, and it's logical. People tend to put their cities in a valley, and the surroundings are there to get them to the valley. It's a human habit, unfortunately, with rivers or coastal cities. And the biggest problem I had since the beginning is that I wasn't understanding the goal. A lot of NAFWIDs came by with, it is to control the gasometer, it is to go for Kurchatov, it is to go for the railroad and stuff like that. I'm like, guys, let's just fucking look at the map. Even if you quote unquote block this Belgorod Gov railroad, there are bypasses by thousands. On top of it, in order to hold it, you need to put enough troops and you need to start digging. And that was the biggest problem. And I said since the first day, the moment these guys stop, that is the moment where the UNPKs are going to fall on their faces. And the very first day, the moment they started to stop and try to entrench themselves in pre-prepared Russian positions that probably they were searching for weapons and other shit, they got Iskander. They were starting to hide, they got Iskander. They were trying to move, they got Lanceted. Was it enough by the scale that we're seeing now? I mean, like, I counted 26 vehicles lost, including 2 beyond the border with the books. It's absolutely, for such a small front, unprecedented for Ukraine until last year at the counter. That's the next part. And the attempt in Belgorod, where in 3 days they lost also about 20 vehicles. So when it comes to the scope of the operation, my biggest fear was that, like to mischaracterize the operation, which I did initially. And I think we had no fucking clue, because in order to pull the trigger on such an operation, you need to think also how your TAC log is going to evolve. So basically, okay, you're going to drive 10, 15, 20 kilometers. Remember 2022 and with the Russians also drove between 80 and 120 kilometers, and they couldn't secure their logistical lines, which meant that they would be what? Fucked up. At some point, they would be completely lost and without fuel and resupplies, and they would be forced to walk. And when you walk down, what happens? Lancets are over your fucking head. They're gonna get wasted. And the Ukrainians, at least those who allegedly try to advance in Konerovo, well, they saw the fucking writing on the wall, and apparently they turned back when they couldn't push forward. Unfortunately, this led to multiple very bad scenes. One of them was the mass surrender. The second one is the very opportunistic strike on a Russian column. We don't know if it was yesterday or the day before. With Atacams, you maybe have already seen the images. They used M101 cluster ammunition, and it was the perfect strike. They were close together. They were not hit by titanium BBs, which could have been problematic for penetration. They were used with impact fuse cluster ammunition, which probably were also used because a lot of the trucks had an armored cabin. So what they want is absolutely the trucks to stop. And the toll is pretty high. I know that a lot of people are not going to be happy with this, but we're speaking of 120 casualties, of which 2/3 are dead. People are going to doom and scream about this. It's a huge mistake, but at the end of the day, that's the fucking thing with war. You make a mistake, you pay it right away. You don't have the time to lament, and you need to get to the second step. I always said about this war is that if you wanted a parade, then you wouldn't go to war. Both sides are pretty tenacious, and both sides are making mistakes. The major mistakes for the Ukrainian side is actually this operation, but I'm going to go at it a bit later. So when you see the actual losses on tape on both sides, they are literally tame. They're high, but they're tame for what we were expecting. We're seeing, as I said, between 2 haulers, 2 tanks, 2 helicopters, 1 crashed, probably completely lost. The second one damaged RTB. 9 trucks fucked up on the strike. Another truck fucked up going towards Suja with ammunition and people inside. Kots made a video about it. One Russian correspondent almost dead. He survived, but I mean, all these shit start to pile up and start to lead to what they are trying to do. I mean, what the Ukrainians were trying to do. On the other side, the Ukrainians got also creamed. We can count at least 3 to 4 murders. I think 6 in total, because of 2 of them were onto the first ditch. A flurry of maps, probably 12. The 2 books. There are some other vehicles I couldn't identify. There are 2 tanks. One that was burned by Ida yesterday or today, and another one that we saw hit by a Lancet. Like, things are not that rosy on the Ukrainian side either. So for an attacking force, it was pretty much understood that they would encounter some resistance. Unfortunately, that resistance seems to come from contactless means as usual, and not from frontal combat. This means that the losses on the Ukrainian side are far outstripping what they can lose as an attrition model for the area, but also they betray a very specific pattern, and that specific pattern is that they try to do the following, and now we're going to go to the tactical aspect. First of all, they overrun the Russian entry points. Then they bypass Suja pretty fast. They mine the city more or less. We have two locations where they are shooting on residents trying to get inside or get outside. But they didn't try to enter. Why? And this is the explanation that I have. There is also another detail I want to speak about. They don't want to get bogged down. It doesn't matter if they have enough forces to take the city or not. They had enough forces to overrun the small detachment at the border checkpoint, and then they had probably enough forces to attack the city and take it against another small detachment, probably not more than 200 people that were guarding the city. But instead of doing that and losing time and precious forces and equipment and getting bogged down and getting hit by UMPKs, they just bypassed everything and went as far as possible. One of the main sources of bullshit about this operation, two majors, I'm gonna call him two pidors, because honestly, the guy is a fucking poison for whatever wants to follow the war without the bullshit. He has gone from they are using Bradleys to attack 30 kilometers within Russia. Bradley's never seen, but it might be true. It's just that we have never seen so far. I would also betray other units that completely cannot do it for the moment because they're busy getting raped in the Pokrovsk and the Toretsk area. But never mind. And then now he posted something absolutely, of course, uncanny because he literally outed himself as being an asshole, where he described that Ukrainians were doing this maximum mobility around the roads so they could be viewed by people on different spots and make themselves a lot bigger than they really are. And to be honest, we wouldn't know that the Ukrainians were all over the fucking Suja area if people like him would tell us that, oh, these guys are 34 kilometers from Suja, these guys 25 kilometers, they were hit in Konerovo and this and that. The problem is that these guys, when it comes purely to the OSINT part of the operation, they caused most of the fucking chaos and most of the fucking stupid over-evaluation of what Ukrainians were doing. And I'm going to go to the detail I spoke to you about. The very first day, they got hit by fucking Iskander on a ditch about 7 kilometers within Russia. When you compare that to what they did when they were attacking Izium, they had losses, they just fucking left them behind, they just pushed forward because they had people coming behind them to reinforce the movement. In fact, what they did, once they knew that the Russians were more or less not able to come back right away, they tried to pull out the vehicles. A guy who has enough supplies to do that doesn't do it. He just pushes forward because, you have your supply lines, you have your logistical assets. But with the Ukrainians right now, if you look at what they're going for, most of their supplies are organic. So basically, you don't have a trail that would reach them back. Everything is in the Humvees, the MRAPs, and whatever they need extra, they will have to, gain time, establish a perimeter, and then let the fuel, the supplies, and so forth continue. Unfortunately for them, they do not control the skies. Yes, it's true, they wiped the helicopters the first day, but they still have the problems with other helicopters coming by, and the most important problem right now is Lancet and Zala. And this has been if you've seen the 4 days of operation, there are at least 10 to 12 strikes per day. And it doesn't seem much, to be honest. But the difference with Zalas against FPVs is that with the Zala, you're going to fly them at least 50, 60 kilometers to your target, and the loitering time is completely different. With an FPV, going to your maximal extent, like say 30 kilometers, it's going to take you about 25 minutes flying full, which you don't do, of course, because you would use your battery. With the Lancet, you don't have that problem. It's a completely different system. Some say a glorified FPV. I don't give a fuck. The problem is that you can loiter with that shit for about an hour. And this changes everything because first of all, it goes faster than the average FPV. And second of all, the EO, the recognition system on it, despite the fact that the Russians keep fucking feeding us bullshit quality, is way above what an FPV can deliver right now for a different price point, of course. And the interoperability with the Zala 416 or Zala 421 makes it a completely different kind of beast. And we've seen it. It's not much of a problem. It does damage, and it has completely stopped some of the velleities of the Ukrainian forces. But the point is not there. The point is, as I said, with 12 strikes, even if 2/3 are effective, you're going to have 8 strikes per day with 8 vehicles gone. And as I said, right now, the losses are roughly between 7 and 10, depending on what is shown by the Russians and what we see on the board. So suddenly, you started this whole heroical fantasy bullshit, but in order to advance, if you have a tank, for instance, going 30 kilometers, you had the same problem back in Robotyne. Those 30 kilometers are fine if you're sure about your street, your one-way road, and your return. But as we saw, the problem for the Ukrainians right now is that they don't control the skies. So it doesn't matter if you are at 30 kilometers from the border, or at 10 kilometers from the border, or 2 kilometers from the border. You don't control the sky. You cannot fucking shoot down every single Lancet. Yes, you're gonna go after the helicopters. Yes, you might even go after the planes. But those drones are the exact same pendant that you're using as FPVs to hunt down whatever you want on the Ukrainian side. Now, there is a huge problem for the Ukrainians is that there are no targets. When you see what they destroyed within the Suja area, there are no targets. Literally, for the absolute failure to reinforce the border area is contributing to having the Ukrainians literally search for targets, go forward, and the FPVs are extended to points where they cannot help the tanks. So the teams need to move back. And what happens when the teams move back? They have to use the roads. Most of the time, the attacks we've seen is them trying to control crossroads or trying to advance as far as possible in order to, let the rear echelon either catch up or start to establish points. And we've seen that with multiple pointers that what they are doing right now is try to have the roads in, close whatever reinforcements are going to come, and that's why you have the tragedy around the Rilsk. They are completely surveying the road network. The Russians made the mistake of using the roads. I mean, it's logical, it's going to use the roads. And the difference is that on one side, even you're going to have this strike with HIMARS on the Russians, you are in Russia now. The lines for the Russians to get up and go at you, even if you're going to repel them for 1, 2, or 3 days, you're going to have the same situation that you have in Volchansk in Ukraine. Ukrainians are throwing meat, and the Russians are going to do just the same. The difference is that instead of having the 5,000 to 7,000 people that attack Kharkov, you have maybe 2,000 to 3,000 that are attacking Kursk in an area which is now almost as big as the initial Kharkov attack. So the main takeaway from here, when I saw this, and I mean, I already posted maps, I'm not going to repost them, just go on my timeline and check for Kursk. The main takeaway is that what they wanted is initially to pierce as far as possible, probably encircle and take over Suja without actually fighting for it, which didn't happen, at least until now. Maybe they've entered inside, I'm not sure, but until now, there is no declaration that the Ukrainians are in control of Suja, despite the calls from Rybar and other idiots. Even fucking Suryak yesterday had to backtrack and say, oh, I never said that Suja was lost. Bro, you literally fucking put it in your fucking map. I mean, like, I love the dude, but sometimes he goes away, and this happens for both sides. Now, the problem with this is that, as I said, the fog of war, which actually wasn't, if you want to be honest and you are like a kind of reporter, you cannot go for the fog of war while you're fucking putting a map. And I'm looking at Pigorchuk, Rybar, where at some point he had put Sumy Oblast well within Kursk Oblast. Like, come on, bro. Like, if you want to get hanged, that was the perfect. And the joke that I made on the group is that Rybar has a medal for being always wrong. And this is the beautiful part of this shit. Like, the Russians did not only fail in a certain sense, with the intelligence, with counterintelligence and everything, they're also failing by promoting people who, when it comes to information, carefully selecting it, being honest. In a certain sense, I would even give it to military informant because despite the doomerism and shit, at least they made their fucking research. They pointed out geolocations and they allowed everybody to see what the real situation was, which was Suja was indeed locked under fire control, but Ukrainians didn't dare to get inside. And then you start, of course, speculating. Why would the Ukrainians not try and get Suja, which would be, the crown pearl, crown jewel of the first 3 days? Imagine, Volchansk never was taken by the Russians, but you're gonna get a city that would be like kind of Volchansk within 3 days without really firing a shot, and get 40 posts and probably another 100 inside the city. That's the fucking thing. The Ukrainians had the perfect chance, and I think, on top of sowing cows, the point was what happened with Lipetsk, but I'm going to follow up later. The point was also to, in my idea, test how fast the Russians going to react, how far they could go in all the border areas. And so far, it's pretty bad because, in 3 days, they managed about 17 kilometers with basically nobody putting them back. I mean, like, the two main fights were one at the KPP, two when apparently some guys tried to enter Gonchareva, then left. We saw them as looters. I'm not sure they were looters, but anyway, it doesn't matter if they were or not. They tried, and then they left Gonchareva. And then the ambush on a civilian Buhanka, but also apparently on a group of Russian soldiers that tried to get within the city that were ambushed just on the outside of it, on the northwestern approach to Suja. So all these things, like, turn to point to, of course, a Russian intelligence, a counterintelligence fiasco, and I'm going to explain this right away, but also to the fact that Ukrainians themselves did not feel confident enough to engage into a street battle and start losing units and getting pinned down. Now, why is there an counterintelligence problem? For two main things. The first of all, a lot of the movement along the roads, a lot of people said, yeah, they mine the border and shit. That's absolutely crap. If the demining part of it was 1 or 2 lines at the border, then there is no miners at the border. Compare this with what happened in Belgorod when they didn't even fucking advance for 200 meters towards the KPP in Grevoron, and like 3 times were hit by mines, and they also were hit by FPVs and other nice things like Lancets. So when you analyze that and you see what was in that area on Suja, you can clearly understand that they did their job. Some people from the Ukrainian military or Russian civilians or Ukrainian civilians that could go and come from the area laid out for them paths without mines, paths that would go through concealed positions, and most importantly, gave up the exact numbers. Of course, this could have been done by drones, could have been done by SIGINT, could have been done by insiders. You don't need to have these guys, but the advancement within the Suja area, which like was only stopped because of Lancets, Iskanders, and some people who dared to fight. And then they just overran these guys and went through. So there you have a huge problem of Russian local border guards, Russian local FSB people who failed to see that they had trackers, backpackers, or someone who actually was going through these small fields and making recon for the Ukrainians. And you can also see it at some point. There is this advance in Darino when Korn Group was showing their vehicles going on. At some point, one vehicle, it's a Zala or FPV. One of the vehicle cut straight through a field of what I think is maize or whatever, and they know exactly where they're going. They know there are no mines there. And of course, you're going to say, yeah, it's a planted field. Yeah, I understand, but that's not the point. It can be a planted field, you're not going to be as stupid enough. But if you are 100% sure, would you dare it? Knowing what has happened in fucking numerous times on both sides? This is where, once again, the border areas from the Russian to Ukrainian side, unfortunately, it has to be said, are not properly educated about this war. And in a certain sense, it has to do with the fact that the Russians still feel unharmed by the war. It could be also, as I said on the second point, it's just an FSB failure. They were like, we don't want to have a problem here, so we're not going to report it properly. And then you have a bigger problem. We've seen that multiple times, from Chernigov to Izium to now in Kursk. However, the units that Ukrainians used for that were also not enough. So, as I said, on the TAC log, you have this potential second base that would be somewhere around Suja. But at the same time, when you saw where they hid their vehicles at the border, which was under the forest canopy, you may understand that they are going to do the same. And one of the things that you see for a lot of times when they get spotted by Zara is that they put themselves almost immediately, either they stop and they get the fuck out of the vehicle because they say, okay, we're spotted, we don't know what it is, so we're going to get out. And they try to hide. The maximum advance proven so far, that was a truck plus two MRAPs. The moment they saw whatever was upon the head, be that the Zala, be that the Supercam, or they felt it or they detected it by, spectrum analyzer, they went straight for the woods. Of course, it didn't help them, but you can see that the degree of detection, not protection, because that unfortunately, as I said, didn't help them. The degree of detection there is absolutely mind-blowing compared to what the Russians had in the area. I'm not saying generally, because generally you have enough videos of Russians going around with spectrum analyzers, and we have these videos when the spectrum would go like dee, 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 dee. But anyway, this means that the Russians, for whatever reason, didn't prepare the area. And I want to be cynical and say they didn't prepare the area because they would have time enough to quote unquote counter the Ukrainians, given that, as I said, you have this counter valley that you go down slope and then you have to go up slope. But also, and this is what apparently happened to Konerovo, is that the geographical traits of the whole area contribute to literally a small valley in which you're going to move very fast, but then you need to find a way to get out of it. And you know what happens when you are in this kind of a maze of a valley? Every time you're going to try to find a way out of it and you're going to stay on the lower ground, you're going to get hit. And it will not change how much you're going to try and avoid it. We're not in 2022, although I would like to have some things that the Russians had in 2022 that I've been clamoring for a while, which is UCAVs. But, okay, whatever. The Ukrainians, they know themselves, they cannot stop. Because they do this to the Russians themselves. The moment when the Russians stop to catch their breath, FPV is going to fall, HIMARS is going to fall, artillery, when it's applicable, is going to fall. And this is the thing. The Ukrainians, for that part, they knew their game, and I said it already. The game was go as fast as possible, create a perimeter, go through it, force the Russians to bring as many reinforcements as possible, then counter the Americans into allowing you to use the Atacams HIMARS to counter them, and start this grinding match, which at some point they think, or that was the plan, in my opinion, is going to absolutely grind down the Russians and create a second or a third front, if you count the Kharkov area, where the Ukrainians are going to have this super Krinky, but Krinky itself was a disaster. So I posted a thread today by a Finnish guy who, as justification or at least trying to understand this, pointed out that it might have to do with the fact that the Ukrainian side of the equation has done the calculus, and that's something that we at Team War Criminal have told you again and again. The trend goes against them. It has nothing to do with the West providing weapons. It has to do with something that wins every single war, and these bodies. If you can stack bodies, it doesn't matter if you have a shovel, it doesn't matter if you have an FPV, it doesn't matter if you have a machine gun, it doesn't matter if you're a fucking F-16 or worse or better. If you have to have the body to go with it. It's true that we went beyond that. We have baseline force multipliers as SPVs, as UCAVs, manned flying machines, helicopters, jets, whatever. But the reality is still the man is centric into this kind of warfare. Be that by multiplying the control with any kind of delegation type, remote control and stuff like that, or simply direct control and direct occupation and physical fighting. Now, once you have this, and despite the fact that you're using this force multiplier as FPVs and shit, you are not able to change the loss equation on the Ukrainian side. On top of it, don't forget, both sides still want to run an economy. The Russians are doing it, and the problem for them, as I said, is that they have to produce a lot more than Ukrainians alone and find this solution of finding parts. Ukrainians do not have that. As I said, a lot of the equipment that they need is given to them or is paid for them by another party. Is it enough? Ukrainians say, no, it's not enough. I think that's not true. I think that unfortunately, the more equipment you're going to give to the Ukrainians, the less they're going to be able to actually handle it. Because we've made the calculus at Team War Criminal, the maximum possibility of the Ukrainian mobilization at every single time should be between 2 and 3 million, but for which only 1/3, and this is the best case scenario, can be put to the front line. Because you need the support for those millions. You're just not gonna fucking bring your wife driving a van to the front lines. That doesn't make sense. You have to have this echelon. Usually the echelon is said to be one fighter for 4 to 5 to 6 logisticians. In the best case scenario with Ukraine, let's go one fighter, 2 logisticians, and you have your 3 million altogether. And this is based on their own data, by the way. So it's based on how many people can be levied within the age group and how many people can be used as the frontline force. So once you're going to arm this, let's say 1.1 million Ukrainians, first of all, you don't have the equipment for that. Second of all, the expenditure alone on training, as I said, and the first 3-4 weeks of combat is just going to make you broke. If you, let's say, we equip these 1 million people with 3,000-4,000 artillery guns, those guns firing once are gonna fucking dry 4,000 to 3,000 rounds. Firing a full fire mission, 10 rounds, those artillery guns are gonna basically fire between 30 and 40,000. Just imagine 30 or 40,000 a day. Multiplied by 30, you are between 900 and 1.2 million rounds a month. We know this is not possible for the supply chain as we have it on both sides. I'm not saying that suddenly the Russians can shit and piss ammunition. I'm just saying that it's just not possible to have that kind of equipment for the Ukrainians, and this is what they're looking for. If you check the minimum amount of, ammunition, 155 they're requiring was roughly 250,000 rounds. So what I'm saying is not madness. It's literally what's going to happen. Plus, as I said, if you give them 3,000 to 4,000 guns, on servants alone, you're going to be between 24,000 and 36,000 people. Like, just try to put it through your head how much fucking fuck the situation for Ukraine is as it stands. So first of all, the ammunition that they want, the equipment that they want cannot be given to them simply because it doesn't exist and it's going to take time to be done. But the most important part, the manpower selection that they have, manpower situation that they have, it's not that much that they don't have enough manpower for the operation at hand. They do not have enough manpower to sustain and grow their forces. This was something we already discussed in 2023 when we spoke about the counter, and I said, given what the Allies can train about 5,000 a month, and the general losses, you do not have the capacity on the Ukrainian side to sustain the losses of those brigades. And we're not speaking people getting killed, we're speaking general losses. So let's say that, we remember all the counter, how it started. It was a fucking shit show. You're gonna lose like 600 people the first day of the counter because you just did something stupid. Not everybody's dead. Like 100 are dead, 30, 40 are captured, and the rest are wounded. Most of them are lightly wounded. They cannot return right away to combat, but they're gonna be out for 4 or 5 days. For 4 or 5 days, your brigade is out of fucking personnel, but it's still required to go and attack. Now we are in lower numbers against an enemy who's still there, who has more ammunition for less people. So the attrition level goes completely batshit insane. And in order not to get to this position, you need to fucking start feeding bodies to the fucking attack. And this is how Ukraine, despite the fact that we're not seeing 200,000-300,000 killed, still ends up with a full deficit of people. Because as I said, war is not just killing and dying. War is also a handicapped person, war is also burnt out people, war is also missing in action, war is also prisoners of war, and war is also fucking PTSD. One of the things that I've seen on both sides is that some guys are not able to fucking sustain assaults at some point, let alone defending against FPVs, artillery, whatever. And this is when there is this interview with some guy who said, like, if you want to fight, it's pretty simple. It's 1 year. After 1 year, you're burnt out. I'm going to find the video again and you need to check it. And the guy has been going at it for over 2 years. So, the problem that we're having right now, with this, is that suddenly we discover that Ukrainians have this super nice plan, but at the same time, they have a shit show. We have a shit show where the Ukrainians need to do something, as I already surmised multiple times, because Donbass is going down. And it's not going down because these guys cannot fight or these guys do not have enough. When you hear the guys from the Russian side on Donbass, they say fucking a fuck ton of FPVs, drones, and now they have started to have artillery. And I'm like, pretty fine, I agree with you. They were counting on having this artillery expenditure. What happened since the Russians are complaining about this shit? That was supposed to hit them in May, right? Well, check Deep State. The advance, the last 2 months, which is June and July, is over 400 kilometers. And people are going to say, oh, but they lost 300 or 200 or whatever, 400 square kilometers in Kursk. I'm like, yeah, it's true. But watch this space. I already told you guys, by this Friday, we would see if the Ukrainians have the balls and the means to do what they wanted to do, which is establish buffer zone, or what they're going to do is try to avoid getting into these fistifights, trying to avoid starting to dig in Suja and getting UMPK to fucking death, and then try to pull the Russians to attack Sumy. And then, of course, then you're going to have a fucking problem because you're going to be the attacking side. We already have seen that the Americans have allowed attacks outside Belgorod. A lot of people are going to be mad about what I'm going to say, but if you check the OGPU, video over the attacks in Lipetsk, it's not secondaries that are hitting there. You can clearly see a Atacam cluster completely covering the ammo dump. And I want to see also what happened with the airfield, because my biggest problem is that with Atacams you cannot always evacuate all the planes, and a lot of planes in Lipetsk were actually donor parts or mothballed and MiG-29s and MiG-31s. So those planes are still very precious for the Russian military, especially the MiG-31s. We will see by satellite what thing might work and what thing might not work. Now the problem that we are having, and this is the biggest issue that we have right now, is that these attacks in Lipetsk, like the one in Morozovsk, they are reactive. So basically they are reacting to the fact that the Russians have put, the Ukrainian forces in Kursk to the test, but also made the mistake once Morozovsk was lost to try and scatter the planes. Lipetsk and Morozovsk are 600 kilometers apart, so planes from Morozovsk didn't go to Lipetsk. It makes no sense, it's way too far. But Lipetsk was, in my opinion, the distribution center of where things are going to go. Voronezh is closer. You heard the alleged article that apparently the Americans refused to attack Voronezh airbase because suddenly it would do something bad. That's bullshit. If it's proven right, like we had with Morozovsk, when the hits allegedly from drones have craters typical with Atacam's unitary warhead, and then we see cluster ammunition over Lipetsk. And as I said, the biggest problem is not the part that suddenly is exploding because of secondaries in the center of the ammo dump. You can see almost 300 meters beside it, clusters still falling 5-10 seconds after, in typical fashion of a continued Atacam's dispersal. Now, what happened initially, I think, is that the Kursk op was greenlighted by the Americans. That's, of course, given the foreign vehicles employed, and given also the MiG reaction by saying, yeah, it's completely fine, they are into the right to self-defense to invade Russia, which I'm not complaining, by the way, because this is the thing that we need to actually recall from the situation. No, what is funny and what actually hurt me the most is that first 2 days, a lot of information warfare made it like the Ukrainians had struck gold. And then the third day came, which was yesterday, and as I said, the Ukrainians themselves started to publish shit. And we saw that actually the photos that they had, they were far less advanced than everybody has drawn in the fucking map. As I said, Suryak himself had to go back and say, oh no, Sucha is not lost. Never said that. I'm sorry, Suri, I like you, man, but you lied. Because that's what you told us with your maps. And everybody in the group was like, what the fuck, has he lost his mind? And we were going to say the same thing when sometimes there are fuck-ups with the Russian side, when he overextends shit. But on that aspect, everyone else, I don't give a fuck, especially Rebar, because I hate the fat pig. But, the moment that Suri, started to backtrack, and the moment other people say, oh, it seems that Ukrainians are so, it's not true. The Ukrainians right now are trying to go on the sides. They're trying to expand exactly what the Russians tried to do in Kharkov. Once you hit a wall in front of you, you have to expand for 3 reasons. Either you're going to stick in and fight, which would be stupid, but I mean, they're piggers, so nobody cares. Or you expand so to allow the troops to have more possibilities to get the fuck out of the region. And given that the Russians apparently do not have the forces there, although there were news yesterday that a small village in Sumy was attacked by the Russians had taken over, which points to a potential drama problem over there that, apparently only one border is exposed, the other border is just DRGs. But the issue is that then now suddenly we're the 4th day and we do not see any kind of hysteria on the Russian side precisely because they understood two things. That whatever happened the first 3 days, and it could get worse if the goal of the Ukrainians to reinforce, resupply, and go forward again. But this time it's going to be a lot more complicated because the staging points that I had before, now they're completely open, especially if they're around Darino or they try to start clustering in Suja. You are going to have this problem where the repeat, that's what happened with the Russians in Kharkov. The first push, extremely successful, the Ukrainians absolutely lost their mind. Remember how it was. There was doom and all this bullshit, and then the Ukrainians pleaded for US weapons to strike Russia, and suddenly things allegedly got better. In fact, they didn't. The Ukrainians are still fighting for Vovchansk exactly 3 months after it started. For 90 days, they cannot fucking liberate a city just next door to Kharkov. Gliboke, same shit. The positions the Russians have now on the heights change everything and create this creaky style situation on the Russian side. So a repeat from the Ukrainian side would require for them to be able to keep resupplying the front. There is where the fucking problem is going to start for the Ukrainians. Because either you're going to resupply by a base 3, 4, 5 kilometers from the Russian border, are you going to start making your base within, as I said, Suja or one of the other villages? But unlike Volchansk with Kharkov, Suja has Kursk far, further. And the Ukrainians have another problem because the only way for them to go straight to the area without going by the canopy forest in front of Sumy is to take the highway to Sumy, which is going to expose them to the same problems that the Russians had when they got bombed in the Rilsk highway. So this whole situation is an exact mirror image on both sides. So the only thing that's going to change and break this deadlock is, as I said, the fact that they are fighting Russia and the Russians are just going to fucking pour people in there. It doesn't matter what they pour. It's going to be conscripts, it's going to be people they're going to grab from Africa, it's going to be people that are training to push forward for Pokrovsk. The point is to just push the Ukrainians far enough so the whole thing becomes a fiasco. Once they're fixed, once the Ukrainians are fixed, this is going to be a cranky show. Is that a good thing or a bad thing for the Russians? Who the fuck cares? The whole point is that for the Ukrainians, the advancement to Russian territory and the alleged use of this territory as a token for negotiations is not gonna exist. The whole point of this operation is the political bargain for potential negotiations. This is what fucking Podolyak said. And it's also a possibility and an attempt from the Ukrainians to be able to expand the scope of the Atacam strikes, which I'm like, okay, this is the best thing ever. Start spamming Atacams everywhere on the Russian border because you have so many of them. So you're going to start putting one Atacams per 10 kilometers. And at the end, you're going to have to spam 80 Atacams every single time. At the meantime, the Russians going to fucking spam Iskanders on you, but your neurological center, your critical center as Ukrainians is far shorter. And you are going to be forced to expand yourself all over the border just the same way the Russians are going to be forced to expand themselves. What do you think it happens when the smaller guy with less reserves is going to try to do the same kind of war as the big guy tried and failed in 2022? You're going to open gaps. And this is why I think that the Finnish guy who made that thread, who basically was a kind of resume of what we did for 8-9 months, is right. I really think that Zelensky tried to leapfrog the next 3-4 months by, first of all, shaming Russia, like, listen, we are like 60 kilometers from the NPP or 50 kilometers in straight line from the NPP. What you gonna do, huh? Imagine third year Ukraine is invading Russia. I'm like, then what? What are you gonna do with it? You know that the exact same themes that work against the Russians or us pro-Russians, when we say there's this, and that, are gonna work for the Ukrainians themselves. You're just gonna waste your fucking logistics and your fucking troops for something that you know you're not gonna be able to keep. If Russia couldn't keep with all its fucking might half of what that earned the first 2 months of invasion, how is Ukraine gonna do that? And once again, this goes against the theme of attrition that the Ukrainians were fucking selling to everyone. And then gonna say, yeah, but we just killed like 80 guys on a fucking convoy and then captured 40 more. You just fucking lost 12 guys on a stupid raid in fucking Kherson. What the fuck are you talking about? You got bombed in the supermarket and there are 40, 50 casualties. You want to play that game? I mean, it's the best way to fucking lose against Russia. And the other thing is the political message it sends to the Russians themselves. I, for the love of God, don't know who the fuck designs this, because up to now, what we had as images, and this is, I think, the most impacting image that we had during this fucking operation. Up to now, we have these images of, you know, Russians doing drive-by BTRs, blowing up small elderly people in their fucking cars. The Ukrainians did just the same on tape. And this doesn't regard the Western audience. The Western audience doesn't care. There are those who hate the Russians. There are those who would like the war to go away. There are those who are like, oh yeah, but you know, it's justifiable and stuff like that. The audience that's going to be impacted by this is the Russian fucking audience. Whereas the Russians up to now were like, okay, you know what, we're winning, but we need to negotiate. If you see some asshole fucking throwing an FPV to an ambulance, and you see an asshole trying to attack cities with FPVs to make people go away, and then you have guys pumping full of lead cars going outside, and you have all these cars being stopped at the outskirts of the city because they get shot. What the fuck do you think the Russians gonna think? Oh, let's stop out? No. What they're gonna think is, let's fuck them up. And in a certain way, the strikes that the Americans have coordinated or allowed to do into Russian airfields is literally because the fucking carousel of strikes that has afflicted the Ukrainian defensive lines was going too hard for them. And everybody was saying on the Ukrainian side, fucking hell, cabs, 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 cabs. And the only thing they did with that is just push the Russians 100 kilometers more. So, first of all, they take the Atacams out of the discussion. And the second part, as I said, it's true that the Russians are slow learners, but what's going to happen is, one of the things that I said before, and I'm going to repeat, do not change anything for as long as you give the Ukrainians the capability to strike you with Atacams onto your fortified bunkers. What is going to change is what I already said at the beginning of this war, which is start to atomize your fucking supply lines. And at some point start to coordinate so you can go together as a fist and attack. So if you want to bombard the Kursk area and Sumy, instead of having everybody at Lipetsk, just fucking spread them out. Lipetsk, Bryansk, Voronezh, and it would make it almost impossible for Ukrainians to keep going after all these targets at once without having this huge fucking footprint and requiring attention from the Russian Air Force. The whole problem with the Ukrainians is that right now they are fucking full fucking package. There is nothing there. They cannot have more. They are pumping whatever they have. They are just flying them. This is, as I said, the maximum pressure logic that the Americans are trying to have the Ukrainians have, up to a point when it hurts the Russians so much that the Russians themselves say, you know what? Okay, let's negotiate. Let's see. But the way to do that, if it was purely kinetical, so basically you send Atacams, you send missiles across Russia, and you humble the Russian military and the Russian leadership, is one thing, because you're not going to Russia per se. Russians are going to ask themselves, what the fuck's going on? Why is this happening? Why are you guys not able to stop this? Because let's face it, for the Lambda citizen, it's still humiliating. But then you have the audacity and the stupid idea to attack in Kursk, a hero city of Russia, in a time frame that recalls the Nazi attempt in 1943. Like, what the fuck do you think is gonna happen, like, mentally, to everyone in Russia? It doesn't matter if they are like retards or high IQ people. They just want to go and fucking want to bury you. And the reaction that we're seeing generally in the Russian audience right now is still meek, I think. But it's going the quote-unquote right way for the Russians. Yes, there was a lot of panic. Yes, there was a lot of fucking screaming. But once they learned the point of the whole dooming thing, I think people like two Peters have a huge responsibility. Rebuy, I'm not even gonna fucking a bit more. A bit more. Sorry. A little bit more. How can I say this? Interested with the whole war part. They can exactly see where this is going to lead long term for the Russians and for the Russian leadership. The threat is for the Ukrainians is that Putin goes full populistic and goes for a mobilization. He's not going to do it. I'm 100% about it, because there is still room for wiggling. But if I was Putin, now is the best fucking moment. See, these guys are attacking us. They're using foreign weapons, American weapons, NATO weapons that are hitting our airfields. And NATO is helping them. And this is not something new. I mean, we have had this thing. What do you want me to do? I'll be forced to. And slowly, the Russian propaganda is going to catch up and put you a fine product of mobilization between 2, 3, 4, 500,000 people. And it's true that it's going to fucking hit the Russian economy within 3 to 6 months because of what the problem is. But it will not matter. Because the biggest difference maker for the Russians right now is throwing people to the gaps that their angle and attack formations are opening. The biggest difference maker for the Russians in the Pokrovsk area and even beyond is the bodies they are throwing to the gaps. And it doesn't matter what the Ukrainians will try to do in Kursk, in Bryansk. What is the biggest problem for Ukraine right now is that things are going shit in Donbass. And if they cross the Donbass-Dnipropetrovsk line, then you have, as I said, a huge other problem, which is a pocket on the back of the Zaporizhia approach. And once that starts, your whole gambit about forcing Russians to go to the table of negotiations because you're attacking the border goes out the fucking window. This is why I think this was the worst decision that Zelensky ever took. I know why he fucking thought it would be smart, because the Americans behind said, okay, we're gonna fucking back you up with ATACMS and shit. But the reality is far more simple. You cannot do with ATACMS what you need to do with the fucking armored column. And that armored column was not enough for the Kursk area. Let's see what happens this weekend. If they're gonna fucking double down or start to do what I think they're gonna do, which is either stopping with the DRG bullshit because they go too far, they're too exposed to Lancet and stuff, but they are going to start having weapons that they have, so GBUs and stuff like that, being thrown 20, 30 kilometers from the border, and risking, of course, of losing jets. Allegedly, one was lost, although it has nothing to do with Kursk in the Kherson, Nikolaev area. So all this stuff with the Ukrainian side is crazy, but it's fine. 350 square kilometers, bro, in 2 days, 3 days, man. Just fine. This is Izium level. This is next level. This is Manstein level. When I read most NAFOs, I'm not speaking about more level-headed people from the pro-Ukrainian side, because everybody started by Tata Gaming saying like, what the fuck is this? What the fuck is this shit? You know the meme with Joe Pesci. All these people that understand the situation here, they are not against it because they are, like it's Ukraine, quote unquote, winning. But what if it goes wrong? And you can already feel a lot of assholes. I posted Deflon yesterday. Calibra Obscura was like, maybe, it's not gonna work that bad. Tata hasn't changed his fucking position. Giuliani, guy, bro, is absolutely in a schizo doomer phase when everything that quote unquote works for the Ukrainians actually is the fucking object of stupidity. And I agree with him. That's the funny part. I agree with him, maybe not for the same reasons. And then you have all this cult of what Ukraine does and looks to work is perfect, it's fine. And I'm like, yeah, go on. Get like 1,000 square kilometers in Kursk and try to defend it with a fucking line of one extra 115 kilometers of front line within Russia, for which you're gonna need, as I said before, that 100 troops per kilometer to keep it, and get UMPK, Iskander, and also, most important part, you cannot even bring HIMARS in that gap. You cannot even bring it. You have to still fire it from across the border. So the front unit have literally no cover whatsoever. And I think, unfortunately, this is also the calculus the Russians made when they fucking abandoned the area. They said, yeah, it's literally garbage territory. You can take it. It's not fun. It's not nice for the Russians trapped in Suja. But this war is not about being nice to anyone. This war is about losing or winning. It's about a cynical calculus. And this is exactly what's going on. Is that for the Russians, okay, it's a fuck up, but is it? If it allows the Ukrainians to waste 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 vehicles and then, like get pushed back within a month or two, who the fuck cares? I mean, look at the Kharkov front for the Russian side. Russians had a very specific goal there. It's going how it's going, but it's allowing the guys in Pokrovsk to put forward. Where is the advance on the Ukrainian side? It's literally, we're gonna hold on to Kursk territory so you can like negotiate. And like, yeah, you got like what? Let's be generous with them. 1,000 square kilometers of Kursk against a whole fucking oblast, and 3 others that are owned between 62 and 74%. Like, why even bother? It's a 1 to 100 exchange. It doesn't even matter. It's even cheaper for the Russians to fight and kick you out of Kursk while pushing Donetsk than try to negotiate there. So I really think there is a fucking problem here for which the Ukrainians have no idea how to solve it, which is, what do you do when you go there and kill a bear, but you're there with a fucking spoon? The only way to kill that bear is to fucking start trying to blind him and then hope that the bear falls from a fucking cliff or something. Or go for the nuts or whatever, doesn't matter. But the point is, you have to finesse the whole shit. And this is not finesse. What happened here is not finesse. Because, had it been like this huge attack when 30 fucking Russian jets are gone, fine. Who the fuck cares? Like, it's a good thing, good expense. It's gonna set up the Russians back a whole year to rebuild the fucking planes as the minimum. Not even speaking about 2 or 3 years. The problem, though, is that you didn't do even that. What you did is, on 2 attacks, you just took out maybe a week or 2 worth of your MPKs. Is that respite going to be nice to you? I'm really not sure about that. Because there is a whole fucking other array the Russians can use to fucking ruin your lives. Now, on the tactical approach itself, a lot of people have had discussion like this is NATO approach. A lot of 2P doors and military observer. A lot of people have said this is maneuver warfare. And I'm like, this is not maneuver warfare, guys. I'm sorry to say it to you, but this is exactly the same thing you did in 2022, and it failed. It failed because one of the things in this kind of fucking warfare right now is that despite what you think about the enemy, and this is especially true for the Russians, you still need to fucking clean the place have bypassed. Because you do not know what is in the place. Your knowledge, your intelligence of the situation is not positive. So it doesn't matter what you think, you need to clean it up, or you need to force them to get the fuck out of there. And this is my biggest problem with the Russians right now, is that they are so much, at least the guys who explain this like this, are so much in all quote unquote about NATO everything. And it's like, guys, no, this is stupid. And one of the things that is making the Ukrainians lose in this course of operation over time is that they're going to have a huge problem pulling back from Suja if they have a problem up front. Let's say that they're pushing, trying to keep the roads closed. Suddenly you got a fucking Russian convoy with overhead a couple of Zalas. Then an Iskander completely blows your staging point about 5 to 7 kilometers from these choke points that you've left. And suddenly what you have is the strikers, your fucking mortar base is gone. And you're gonna do what? Try to fight it out with FPVs? This means that you're going to have to launch these FPVs beyond the border. That's 20 minutes to fly there. What do you think is going to happen in 20 minutes if your FPVs come too late? This is what I'm trying to explain every time. Time is money, money is lives. So time is lives. And it doesn't matter if you're going to beat that column once that column has bypassed the positions, has completely creamed your fucking strikers or whatever you had there. They're gone. And by them advancing and you pulling back, their team of FPVs and artillery is putting up front as well. And this is what fucking handicapped Russia in 2022. The failures, it was in a sense, the failures in Nikolaev, the failures in the Kiev region, they're all embodied in what the Ukrainians try to do right now in Kursk in a much more limited maneuver. And I really hope that it becomes a bit more serious for the Russians and they can, like Ukrainians can stand their ground at least a couple of weeks. Because if they do all this for 2-3 weeks, but they get booted right away from this huge area in Kursk oblast, then the humiliation for Zelensky is going to be extreme. Trust me, despite all the bravado, the bullshit NAFO is going to boost for him, it's going to be simple. You tried the most stupid shit, it failed stupidly and shittily, and right now you would like to, first of all, present your condolences to the people you killed in Kursk Oblast, defending jack shit. But also, if the Russians keep going the way they're going, as I said, they're in Vozhizhenka, if they break down there, the complete fucking highway is gone. Pokrovsk-Konstantinovka. And they are only 4 kilometers from Selidovo, which means the highway going towards Ugledar and Krakow is gone as well. That's game, guys. It's not going to end today or tomorrow, but that's game because you have lost your main axis. And unlike what's going on in Kursk, you've lost them for good because the people you sent to Kursk are not fighting down there. So this is literally something I had called Zelensky in 2022. There is a gambler mentality with this guy. And the problem with the gambler mentality is that most of the time there is no self-control. There is this impulse of going, okay, next time I'm going to win. And in this case, I'm pretty sure that it was very complicated for him to make this decision. Bullshit. He literally thought, we are going to do this. And my biggest scare for the Ukrainian armed forces right now is not that much that the Russians gonna fucking cut them in pieces. No. My biggest scare is that whoever comes back from the Kursk offensive is gonna be sent straight up in Toretsk or straight up in Pokrovsk. And this time, he's not gonna be 20-year-old kids that can barely hold a fucking rifle waiting for them. No, this time you're gonna have fucking Zex that want to make a bowl soup with you. By the way, guys, just go and check the pictures from the Kinburg Pit. Just amazing shit happening there. Thank you, Buddha Nigger. You're the best. And then the biggest problem right now, however, is something else. Like, so far, the Americans have been very nice to disguise their attacks against Russian airfields with quote-unquote Ukrainian drones. And this is due to the Russians' responsibility themselves. And keep going, has is not a fucking value at all. What you need to absolutely do is go underground for your ammunition. Separate them, put gabions around it, put solid rooftops around them underground, and that's it. Everything else doesn't matter. People are going to say, yeah, but you have only one door. Sure, but you will need something more than OAVs, than long-range drones to do that. And people are now thinking about how to have a long-range cluster drone on the Ukrainian side. The problem with the long-range dropping clusters as drone dropping clusters is that you will need to have a belly payload. You cannot have how you do it with a missile because of the pattern of flight. You have a planar flight instead of having a ballistic trajectory, which is how the fucking it is possible for the ballistic missiles to scatter their fucking clusters. With a plane, you will have to have a bomber motion, which would have you bank in front of your target and then go for it. That is extremely dangerous for the drone itself because you're gonna have a whole fucking defilade firing at you, and then trying to do that banking and going towards the length of the airfield, if you want to attack aircraft, is going to open you to even small arms fire, given that you cannot drop them at, I don't know, 100 meters or 400 meters that happens with the clusters for ballistic missile, given the trajectory. You can fly higher, but if you fly higher, then you have the problem that AD is going to lock you from way before, because you're going to have to raise your altitude, and given the altitude gain on these propeller planes, because they're not really drones, then you're going to reveal yourself, and then any kind of fucking shitty archaic AD is going to take you out. So there are patterns and there are problems that you need to solve for the Ukrainians on that aspect. Therefore, the solution for them right now is ATACMS, and it's being limited by the range of the missile itself. So for the Russians, the only solution is to go underground. There is no other possibility. HASS is going to work for as long as you think the Americans are going to let you ruin the Ukrainians. They did it in Morozovsk, they did it in Dnipro, they're going to do probably that in Baltimore. So the thing is, CABs work, they hurt the Ukrainians, and the Americans are going to try and find a finesse in order to allow the Ukrainians to use weapons that they cannot theoretically use, because Biden said only in Kharkov, only there, only there. The whole idea of the Kursk invasion, in my opinion, is to allow for the expanse of the American and Western weapons along these areas. The problem is, I said, that once you expand the scope, you need to point launchers to every 10 or so kilometers, which is counterproductive for you because you do not produce the said equipment or weapons. And therefore, I think that for whatever has happened in this war, the Russian calculus is going to be the same cynical bullshit, which is letting the Ukrainians overspend and overextend themselves, and then fucking hitting them in the mouth and turning them into a piñata, a big piñata if possible. And then for the rest of the operation right now, we can see that the last strikes from Lancets and the last strikes from artillery are still more or less at the level of Suja. One on the east, the other on the west, roughly latitude-wise about 1 kilometer higher northern than Suja. So basically, we're going to what I said. The line of defense is going to be around Suja, and it's going to be along the highways that lead to Suja. This is a big issue because it's going to allow the Ukrainians to have a rather good road network, not very extensive, but a good road network to sustain probably at least 1 or 2 months of resistance there, unless something happens like we're going to call them up. Russians finally decide to use UCAVs and start picking up the Ukrainian positions via thermals, of course, as often as far as they need to, which is on the border and beyond it. It's been almost 3 years. We saw that, as I said, what the Iranians could do when they could do it. It was fine. It was not a groundbreaking revolution. Turks had done it with the Armenians before, but basically, Oran showed itself capable enough to do what was asked of it, which is basically fly without a human, shit on whoever was under, and then get out and get shot down. The attrition, as I said, for these assets now is not going to be more expensive than losing a tank, be that the brand new T90M or be that a refurbished T80 BVM, which, because of the inflation cost, still going to cost you about $1 to $1.2 million. Whereas an Orion, simplified to the max, is going to cost you what, 3 million maybe? And if the money is a problem, then you can always buy shit from the Iranians. And this is not against the Iranians at all. It's just like you can use them as throwaway your calves. You're still going to pay like 2 to 3 million, and someone else is going to build them for you, which doesn't overload your productive system. But generally speaking, and this is where every year or every situation that happened, UCAV solved a big part of it. Like in 2023, Forepost did the job. 2023 in May, Orion and Forepost were there. 2024, some strike from Forepost as well. So this is the greatest absent, along with Russian FPVs. But this also means what I said is that the Russian units in the Suja area were there to literally survey the border. They weren't able to, do anything against the kind of firepower and force that went against them. So basically, as I said, hopefully within this weekend, already today, you have voices that say that the advance in Kursk has stopped. We'll see, because the same guys were like yapping that things were going to shit. How much can you trust them? I personally don't trust any of these people as far as I can throw them. So we will have to wait. But everything that we're seeing, at least with the geolocations and also the lack of new claims, tends to show that the worst of the first phase of Ukrainian assault towards Kursk oblast has more or less passed. And we'll see if this weekend they do what I think they're going to do, which is expand on the flanks and try to push once more to, I think, warrant a reply from the Russians, or they are going slowly trying to get inside Suja. It's going to be not a fair fight, but it is what it is. We're going to have more bad images from the city with probably surrendering Russian soldiers, dead Russian soldiers, FPV strikes all over the place, HIMARS on the city, HIMARS on the surrounding, trying to stop the Russians from coming inside. Basically, a repeat of old transfer, unfortunately, with the Russians being quote unquote initially in the wrong side, and then slowly, Russian aviation is going to take back the driver's seat and is going to reduce Suja, unfortunately, to rubble with the Ukrainian assholes inside, inshallah. But so basically, hopefully, it can go that fast, which is this weekend up to next Wednesday. I do not believe that, as I said in the group. I think that if the Ukrainians do what I expect them to do, it's going to last at least 1 or 2 months, especially with the FPV threat. And the fact that suddenly the Russians cannot employ their helicopters the way they could, mostly because the Ukrainians have the time to deduct more or less where the firing solutions are going to come from. Don't forget, it's extremely weird what's going on with helicopters because thematically, the drone is not fast enough to catch up with the helicopter deployment. I'm going to explain you why. If the drone is flown when the helicopter is detected before it launches its missile, a Vickers missile is going to fly more or less 22 to 24 seconds maximum. So in order for the drone to get to the position, which is 10 kilometers in average, the drone is going to flying at 110, 120. The drone cannot catch up within 10 minutes, while the helicopter can literally fire a whole rack, 24 by 4, a whole rack within 1 minute 30, get the fuck out before the drone catches up with him. This means that, in fact, the Ukrainians know more or less where the target area is, and they're just fucking flying advanced drones to the positions, laying them down on the ground, and waiting for the Russian helicopters to show off. This is a actually very autistic way to deal with it, but it's also very possible that instead of this, there is a centralized solution, and that's what I said. They have probably portable radars that they usually use for mortar fire that have been tweaked to actually also be acoustic radars for helicopters and shit like that. They are literally acoustic radars, but okay. So they deploy this shit at 20, 15, 20 kilometers. They pick up a very large noise, which is helicopter rotor. The launches, so couple of hours when it starts, helicopters go back. Guys have more or less the location. They drop the fucking drones in advance. Drones stay there for the time needed. The battery is not really a problem. The second carousel comes by. Tada, drone is next to it and goes straight to a helicopter, which most of the time doesn't work. I explain why. There's a rotor downwash. But once the helicopter is stationary, especially the helicopters with a tilt, so a tail rotor, then you're going to have a lot less downwash coming straight behind it because of the double vortex. And most of the time, you're still going to be washed away, but unfortunately, the explosion doesn't care about, the 1 or 2 or half a meter. It's still going to do some damage. It's not going to down the helicopter that way. It's going probably to force him to get the fuck out. This is what happened twice already. Once with the damage to the tail rotor on MiG-28, another one shown today by Sternenko on a MiG-8, where it clearly says the helicopter didn't work there anymore. Basically, guys got spooked and were like, what the fuck's going on? But this requires something else, and unfortunately, the Russians already have it, which is this requires an end-lost missile, in this case, KH-39, aka Lemur, aka Project 305, item 305, which allows you to not stay shot like you're using a normal ATGM. Then you can offboard sight for up to 6 to 8 degrees because the connection to the missile is not via laser, it's via a radio command link. And this changed everything because by the time the drone comes to you and you're drifting the one or the other side, the drone cannot even catch you while you have already launched your missile and gone. Let alone, wait for that. You can still move outside. And this is one of the things that, unfortunately for me, I don't get why the Russians have not completely abandoned the Vickers. I understand that it's a lot more economical than it's daily. And also, it's faster. The Vickers is going to go between 400 meters per second to 550 meters per second on its maximal speed, whereas the Israeli is going to be around 300, 250, 300 meters per second. But in both cases, it still allows you to the maximum length of flight is about 67 seconds for the 305. So it still allows you to avoid getting attacked by an FPV if the FPV is on a cold starting point. So there are a lot of technical things that need to change
But one of the things that doesn't need to change actually is when using UCAV, the altitude is way too high for the FPV drone. And most important part, the UCAV, let's say it's an Orion or let's say it's a Moager, whatever, it doesn't matter, is using a weapon that can be literally on top of the target. Launch it, of course, it's not going to be that fast, it's about 100 meters per second, but who the fuck cares? You're so high that the FPV is not a problem. And given the lack of actual air defense from the Ukrainians, you can see that the whole normal air defense for the Ukrainians was 2 books. They got fact very, very early. That's the theater defense. And then you have these allegations about the S-300 or Patriot in the Sumy airport. I do not believe that. What I think is, as I said, for the helicopters at least, the biggest problem is the FPVs. They cannot be safe anymore. Mostly because, as I said, Ukrainians are playing the autist or have a different way of dealing them. So it allows the Russians only 1 or 2 salvos, and then after that, the drone tries to come for you. So generally speaking, our biggest problem on the Ukrainian side is that they are doing the best they can with the shittiest thing they can find out. And this comes to the fact that unfortunately the Russians have classical means of action, and this makes it extremely difficult for everyone else to be able to do some stuff. So basically, for the Russians, they would never think to start using FPVs to intercept Ukrainian helicopters. They tried a couple of times. It didn't work for the same reason that it didn't work for the Russians either. You will have to have a complete different approach to the laws of physics to be able to do that. And one of those is to have, kind of buckshot offset ammunition to hit, despite the fact that you cannot come close enough to the helicopter. This, however, and this is one of the things I wanted to finish with, shows that once again, for the Russians, some solutions are already there. They don't even need to fucking bother because they have the means also to, apply them. For the Ukrainians, they had them, and they did exactly what the Russians don't want to do. They had over 50 Bayraktars. They went the first 3, 4, 5 weeks and wasted almost every single one of them just to score, score, and score. The fact that the Russians still have this mentality of preserving means, despite having more money, despite having more capabilities than the Ukrainians, is, I'm sorry to say, it's mind-boggling. And people are going to say, yeah, but they don't work. I mean, who the fuck cares if they don't work? The whole point with the Ukrainians is there are a couple of thousand units of getting broke militarily. So if you are flying 100 Orions, these guys fire 4 times and they take out 400 targets, who the fuck cares that you lost all 100 of them? The replacement of one Orion at $5 million far exceeds whatever shit the Ukrainians get from the West they cannot get back. Taking out 4 Miradors for an Orion, man, that's the best thing ever. It changes your whole fucking approach. The next 30 guys from the Ukrainian side, they're gonna have to ride the bus or something. And we saw how well it works in Zaporizhia. All this stuff for the Russian leadership, I'm sorry, and this is one of the things that gets me mad. There is a calculus I don't understand. Because they are wasting a fuck ton of money by losing tanks, they are wasting a fuck ton of money by paying people for a electronic warfare system that most of the time is gonna last you 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, and then after that it's completely obsolete. Just look at Podubny. He had a fucking very nice shark type electronic warfare on the roof of his car. Did it help? No. At some point, something's gonna go wrong. So instead of, risking people's life for some operation, I'm not saying for everything else, for a breakthrough, you're not gonna be able to do it only with UCAVs and FPVs. See what the Ukrainians do. You're gonna push at a certain point, but then the body blows are gonna come home. So the whole point is that for situations like this one, and some chicken in Lib said that. The UCAV is perfect. It doesn't matter how much you fucking lose because it's less people. Instead of losing those, 80 guys on that fucking truck convoy, could have been 18 Ukrainians getting killed in 4K. And this mentality on the Russian side, which says like, we don't need it. We need like a more expansive way of fighting instead of over focusing on some things. I agree with him, to be honest. Because, see, the FPVs are not solving anything for Ukraine at the end. Yes, you're throwing 1,000 FPVs, they're throwing hundreds of UMPKs. At the end, the kill ratio stays the same. And it goes against Ukraine. And that's also one of the things that, despite being, antiquated as a thinking, it still is grounded into the reality, which is Russia is fighting an enemy that cannot, for the love of God, fight 1-to-1 against them. So every loss on the Ukrainian side counts for 5 on the Russian side. And you know that you are joking with this, but it's true. And one of the things I want to point out is that, for instance, Ukraine has received from abroad 530 T-72 types, 40 of them being PT-91, and then 490 being all types of T-72s, T-72 AVs, T-72 M1s, M1Rs, doesn't matter. Out of all these, according to Oryx, they've lost 153 tanks. Of those 530 donated, they've lost about 25-26%. That's huge, guys. Because most of these tanks weren't killed. There's probably a lot more, but for these numbers, most of these tanks weren't killed fighting. They were basically killed in transit or trying to get the fuck out of a situation they could not defend themselves for. FPVs, Lancets are a lot of the means used to kill these tanks. Where are they going to find the rest of it? And we had a discussion with the guys at the Timor Criminal, and we're having the same logic. There are no more stocks for T-72s outside of some countries that are not going to give them. For example, India, or Iran, or Iraq, or Algeria. The Moroccans are going to maybe give another 90, no problem. Then what? The whole point for the Ukrainian side now is to make the best of it with what they have. And it seems for a lot of people, once you look at the donations, for instance, Leopard 2 A6s, they only had like 34, 10 of which actually weren't even Leopard 2 A6, they were STRV 122s, which is basically to A5. But look at Oryx again. Of those 34, 18 are gone. This is your value-added force multiplier tank, aka game changer, who after roughly a year after its introduction is already gone. Let's go for Abrams. Even let's take the Oryx thing. They were introduced nominally in November 2023, but in February 2024 they were advertised. 6 months, minus 11. It's a lot more, guys, but let's say minus 11. 6 months, more than one third of the times that you introduced is gone. Challenger, we will not speak of it because it's a piece of shit, so it's better that it's not even on the battlefield. It kills less people on both sides. Then you got what? Leopard 1A5s. The whole quality level that everybody was mocking Russia for the T-62s, T-55s, and so on, is coming to knock on the door of the Ukrainian forces. Bradleys, they're losing them every single day, 1 or 2. So guys, once again, Ukraine, with this fucking raid and with their shitty actions in Pokrovsk, are losing their best assets for something that is not working. Especially the political military aspect of the Kursk invasion. Like, it's, once again, why would Putin negotiate for Kursk, which is, it's his? He's just going to fucking mobilize and kill you. It's such a historical template, you know, like it's gonna always be like that. And this is the whole problem that we've had with this space today, is that there's the bewilderment of seeing, first of all, the shit show that's becoming, but also he actually did it. Like, it's the only thing we wanted him to fucking fake up and do it. And he does it, and he does it with such glee. Everybody's applauding, but I'm pretty sure that every single fucking guy in Zelensky's entourage, including Sirsky, are shitting bricks right now. Because either they knew that it's gonna last, the expanse 3 to 5 days, either they didn't knew, they fucking literally played the roulette, and now it's looking like a start of a fucking shit show. And then, of course, the Russians blow a fucking supermarket. Because based. So, guys, to sum up everything. First of all, huge Russian intelligence fuck up. It's not even enough to say fuck up. It's worse than that. Justifiable, not, but at least could be explained by the fact that you got garbage land behind it, and the Russians, for them, it was fine. Just get to the valley, get fucked, and then I'm gonna fucking trash you out. Still, not a good look, not good optics, and especially not when you have to do with a PR nation, a hereditary nation as Ukraine. Second part, the tactical aspect. Not enough troops to sustain a large bridgehead, and the tactics that they were employed, which is popping up almost everywhere to sow panic and get this amplified by assholes on the Russian side. Plus, now we are having waiters on Kursk oblast. Basically, someone sent the video to the Ukrainians right away after the convoy was hit. Makes this for an even bigger shit show. However, once we analyze geolocations, how they get through, what they are showing, because this is very important, this is what we can see. The realities might be something completely different. We can see that the biggest thing was to isolate the KPP, so nobody would come and help them out. That was how the two T-62-72s got hit. And after isolating the KPP, attack it by drones, make everybody surrender, it's posed, very nice images, it's fine, it's cool. After that, you got to push outside, couple of ambushes, kill some civilians, kill some guys that still try to defend Suzla coming from outside, move as fast as you can up front. Suddenly you hit a snag, and that snag is the MIM-VP, Lancet, plus artillery, and then you got Iskander. You got Iskander to a fucking wood. You get Iskander to a trench you try to occupy. You get Iskander to some positions you occupy during the night. Krasnopol hits you. You are in a state of disarray because what looked like a fucking piece of cake, suddenly you are into the fucking eye of the vortex. And after that, your pushes, as far as possible, are so-so. Some are very good, some are very bad. You get fucking creamed by helicopters and artillery. And the most important part, you cannot communicate. One of the things that makes Ukrainian military so good towards the Westerners is that they show everything. Almost nothing was shown, except for, of course, some local successes. And then the Russians started to publish their shit. Not enough to sway the opinion that this was some kind of absolute success. And I would even say that they even outed that they were lying to the public from day one, because they showed how the Ukrainians got through, and the size of the force they were showing clearly wasn't some kind of clearing the area. And you can see this is not a raid, this is not some kind of DRG sabotage. This is an actual Ukrainian army with fucking columns going through the Kursk oblast. It's basically an invasion. And the fact that nobody called it an invasion yet, which is, I mean, it's worse than lying, honestly. It's self-deprecating. Puts that to the point that I explained to you that the shit show on the Russian side was complete. And then reality kicked in. You could see the movements from the Ukrainian side were mostly based on mobility, on control of the road, fire control of avenues. We had a visual control beyond the line of contact, which caused the death of over 80 Russian reinforcements. And then suddenly yesterday already it was like this, but today we hear, a lot of sources say that the advance has stalled. And then we go back to what I described. The logic is some gambit was tried, it fucked, and now due to a lot of factors, topography, force management, backlog, all this shit, now it's time for the Ukrainians to make a choice, double down, or start to hunker around in Suja and let's go the Volchansk way, which is a grinding match over the city. And for that, they have 2 months, honestly. They have August and September, because from October, leaves are going to start falling. And a lot of the advantages they had by going into Kursk are going to go out. And with the winter, in the worst case scenario, we would see one of the worst things for the Ukrainians themselves, see them feed up a Krinky style operation, which would cost them not only political but militarily. We see like 3,000-4,000 people being fed to that small pocket, and which is gonna turn out into a cauldron, and which it's maybe possible that it turns out into something way worse. Or then the Ukrainians are doing like baiting hole and hole, which is keeping Suja 1 or 2 weeks, then pulling out and forcing the Russians to pursue them, and the pursuit group gets hammered by everything that they have. And of course, we know that already the Americans have allowed strikes in Russian territory. So you go with another Kharkov shit show, and at the end, the colossal failure of the Kursk operation would be passed as a success, because see, now we're hitting the Russians, we have allowed strikes, and it's very fine. I'm like, yeah, okay, you allowed strikes in the Kursk rear, but at the end of the day, the Russians are not stopping in Donetsk. And this is the whole problem that we have right now. Everybody's forgetting Donetsk, and I think in a certain sense, it could have been also an attempt to lift morale, but not the way they should have done it. Let's be honest. So that was it, guys. Thank you very much for being here. I'm not gonna take questions today, but on Monday I'm gonna do just a question and answer based on the front. There is not gonna be anything else but you guys asking me, or coming through and contributing. So I know it's not gonna be funny for you, but it is what it is. Have a nice day, guys. Thank you for being here. Bye bye.